Welcome, and today we are going to have a look at this photograph which was done by a first year photography student, and I'm basically doing this as a demonstration to show them how I would Photoshop this. The image itself has got a few issues. Considering it's done by a first year photography studio, the pose and all that sort of thing is quite good. There's a few little issues with lighting that we would probably like to fix up, as well as some issues with exposure and that type of thing as well. Now, this image, when it was originally came out of the camera, it's a little bit on the dark side, so to speak. So we want to make this a little bit lighter so that we can edit it, and we're trying to get the image into Photoshop in the best form that we can to work on it. So I'm opening the RAW file in Camera Raw, and I'm going to do some playing around with it in here first before we go into Photoshop, and then we can do some more adjustments to it. Now, the first thing that we need to do with this is that the exposure is not quite right, which is not too much of an issue because we're using RAW files. I'm going to take the exposure and the blacks and some of these things here, some of the sliders, and play around with them to get the exposure right. But rather than look at the image, I'm actually looking at the histogram up the top to see what's going on. And if I have my mouse over the slider for the exposure and hold down the Alt key, as I'm holding down the Alt key and then clicking on the exposure, I can actually see what areas I'm going to mask out and lose detailing. So my biggest concern is this area here, because this is really the hot spot of the image. The car itself, you can see we're starting to lose a bit of detail here. If I just hold that down again, you can see this, the area in red just on the bonnet here is starting to lose some white detail in it. So what I want to do here, I just want to bring that back just a little bit because I can always lighten this up down the track. I also usually back off the saturation by about a -16, anywhere between -10, -16. I always find that digital cameras, it doesn't matter whether it's Canon, Nikon, Sony or whatever, always seem to oversaturate just a little bit, so I like to drop that down just a little. We're going to look at the blacks as well. If I again hold down the Alt key as I'm looking at the blacks, you can see all those spots that are missing, so I'm just going to bring that back. And what that's doing is it's giving me more detail into the file itself. I could even bring some little fill light into here, and you see then it actually fills some of those shadows areas. I don't think this image is going to need it. We're going to play around with it a bit more. And I might just go back to my exposure. Now I've done my blacks, I might just drop that exposure a little bit. Maybe I'll bring it up just a little, but it's a bit bright for me, so I'm just going to drop the brightness down a little bit as well so that I've got some nice solid file to start with. So I'm looking at this image and I'm thinking, okay, it now looks about ready for me to take into Photoshop. But this is, I'm assuming, a fashion image. The clarity, if I bring the clarity slider up a lot, you'll see how much sharper that comes. I'm just going to bring that up just a little bit just to increase the clarity a little. And I'm also going into my lens correction. I'm just going to click on that just to clean up the lens itself. So this was used with an 18-20 lens, and if I just turn it on and off, you can see it just gets rid of any distortion that the lens actually puts in there as well. Just cleans that up a little bit. Before I take this into Photoshop, I could start looking at using my adjustment brushes to lighten and fix some of the lighting. So the adjustment brush is up here, and if I click on that, you'll notice that we've got a whole heap of exposure, brightness, contrast, etc. that we can use, that we can make adjustments on this before we even take this into Photoshop. The best thing about this is the fact that if I do it this way, it's using the RAW file, and I'm not doing anything destructive to the file itself. So I'm going to come in nice and close firstly on our model's face, because there's some issues in the face itself that I want to fix. See how we've got this line that goes down her face from the thing, we've got a little bit of shadow under the eye. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm just going to lighten these areas a little bit. And in fact, I'm doing K and K, which gives me a new brush, and I'm just going to do a little bit of a lighten over the entire face there and a little bit down the arm. And I'm doing another K and K, and this time I'm coming in really close. And I'm just going to get rid of that shadow detail that's just on the bottom of the chin there. It's really distracting for me. Let's come in a little bit closer there. Just want to lighten that down. I'm not getting rid of it altogether because that would get rid of her face shape, but I am trying to lighten it. What we've got here is a little bit of a, I'm just going to erase a little bit that I did there. It's a little bit of a classic newbie issue where the lighting is not for the face, the lighting was for everything but. So I'm now just going to come out of that and come back a little bit. And we've now got her face. I'm much happier with the way that the light is now falling onto her there. I could get really fussy and start going into the shadow on the arm and that, but we won't worry too much about this today. Come out a little bit more now. At the moment, what's happening with this image is it's being cut in two by a dark area through the centre. I've got a highlight that I look over on this area and a highlight that I look over on this area. So I've got two options. Because I'm assuming this is a fashion shot, not a photo of the car, I'm looking at making our model be the person that stands out the most. So I could darken this area down, which, if I go K again, I'll show you with my adjustment brush, I can actually get in here and just darken the highlight that's on the front of the car there. So what's actually happening now is it's bringing the model to be the most important part of that image. And if I just go back to my normal view, you can see now she's the first thing that you look at and not the car. But rather than do that, I'm just going to delete that one off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a little bit more light into this area and connect the two so that you've got a nice flow from the model to the car back to the model and so on and so forth. It's sort of got that nice flow about it. But this really is just a big dark line down the centre of this image, which is really cutting it in half. So I'm going to change my exposure up to lighter. And I'm just going to, with a fairly wide brush, I'm actually going to come through and just lighten this area in here. Now, I am no car expert, but when you're trying to light cars with little lights, you get lots of spectacular highlights here, and it really doesn't do the cars justice. So we'll look at that a little bit in Photoshop as well in a minute once we get this open in there. So I'm just going to lighten that car up a little bit. And you can see I'm actually doing a lot of KKing to open other bits because I want to put a little bit more light too into the front of this vehicle, just onto the grille, and just lighten some of those front areas up a little bit too. So now I'm a bit happier with how this is starting to look because of the fact that we have got more connection between the model and the car. There was a real line there that was just really bothering me. It was really cutting that image in half. And with these, you can actually go back to them at any time and turn them up and down as you want to. So I went a little bit heavy there, so I'm just turning it down a little bit. So we now have got a starting point that I am now happy with to take into Photoshop so I can start doing some work on it. There's still a little bit of unevenness within this vehicle, but we'll fix that up once we get it into Photoshop. In actual saying that, I'm just going to go back and do one more little bit of it's a little bit dark in here. We'll just lighten that up a little bit. And there's a little bit in there that just needs it as well. Okay, so I'm now going to open my photo in Photoshop. Now, once we get the image into Photoshop, there's a lot of different things that we can do. We need to start looking at where our eye's going. I'm going to make a copy of the background layer, which is something I always do because I want to be able to screw this one up and throw it away if I have to. I'm going to first off use an adjustment layer, and I'm going to just pull the entire, whoops, wrong adjustment layer, go to the curves. I'm going to bring it up really, really light. And then I'm just going to go back to my layers. Now, you're probably looking at this going, oh, this is looking terrible. But what I'm actually trying to do here is clean up the background before I start working on the foreground. There's a lot of little elements in here, which once I get started, I'm not going to be able to see because I'm planning on darkening a lot of this down. But if I print it at a later date, some of these details are going to come up. So I'm going to get my healing brush, and I'm going to come in a little bit closer just on this, whatever this vent window thing is over here. I'm going to bring up a nice big brush. And I'm just going to go hold my Alt key down, and I'm just going to, oops, let me make sure I'm on my background layer before I do this. So we can try that again. I'm just going to come up and with my, that didn't work very well, let me try that again. Don't history brush your actual bit that you're trying to get out. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the top of that and just bring it down a little bit. And what I'm trying to do is just get rid of this little vent that's in the background. I probably should have gone for a bit of a smaller brush. And we'll just do a click over the top of that as well, and that should fix it up. And there's also this pipe coming down the wall over here, so we might just try and get rid of that while we're here as well. And I'm going to pick something that's a little closer to it. So with my Alt key, and I'm going to click on there, and then I'm going to come across, and I'm just going to run that up the pipe there, and that should just get rid of that pipe in the background. Excellent. And if I come over this way, there's actually a little bit of issues with that, but we're going to darken that down. And there is a doorway in the back here, which I could also darken down, but I think at this point it's not going to really be seen. Now that I've actually done that, and I'm happy with that little bit in the corner, I'm going to take my curves level layer and I'm going to dump it. The only reason that curves layer was there was so that I could see what was in the background. Now that I've fixed it, I don't need it anymore. Okay, so now we're going to look at the car itself. I've looked at the background, now I'm looking at this car vehicle, and I'm going to do the model last. The secret to this is, and again I've just made a copy of that in case I stuff it up so I can go back to where I was. I'm going to get my healing tool and I'm going to come in onto the bonnet, and what I'm trying to do is get rid of these little windows that were actually in the warehouse where this was shot, because they're distracting. This is what I mean about car photography, is it's very difficult. It takes an expert to do an absolutely amazing car shot. If you want to see brilliant car work, Google Orange Lane Studios and have a look at some of the work that they do with cars. It's just unbelievable. Now what I might do at this point is, apart from getting my brush a bit smaller, is stop the recording here and come back into a part 2 of this recording once I've actually gone around and done all these little bits and pieces from this car to get rid of all the bits that I'm not happy with. So I'll see you in part 2.